The cry that stopped a legend. Greenwood Park was usually the quietest place in the city. Tall oak trees stood like ancient guardians. Sunlight slipped gently through their leaves, and the lake reflected the sky like a perfect mirror. Children played near the swings. Couples talked softly on benches. Joggers passed by with steady rhythm. For most people, this park was a place to escape. For Mike Tyson, this park was a place to heal. After decades of fame, pressure, and a past filled with both glory and pain, Mike found peace in simple things: sunlight on the water, fresh air, soft earth beneath his shoes. He came here almost every afternoon, away from cameras, away from noise, away from the world that labeled him before knowing him. He came here to reconnect with something deeper. But on this day, peace broke not slowly, not gently. It shattered, a cry. Nobody expected Mike had just finished a long meditation by the lakeside. He sat cross-legged, eyes closed, counting his breaths as the cool breeze brushed his face. And then, a scream. Sharp, pained. Not loud, but full of terror. "Please, stop, I didn't do anything." Mike's eyes snapped open instantly. He wasn't the Iron Mike of the ring anymore. He wasn't the young, fierce fighter the world once feared. But his instincts, the ones honed in survival, shaped by hardship, were still razor-sharp. He turned his head toward the sound. The scream came again, then a man's angry voice. Then another, a woman's sob. Mike stood up, not rushed, not panicked, but with purpose. A jogger ran past, looking over his shoulder nervously. Two teenagers stopped skateboarding. A mother held her child closer. The park air shifted. Something was wrong, badly wrong. Mike began walking, each step heavier, each breath sharper, each second louder in his chest. As he moved closer to the willow trees, the serene park transformed into a scene of tension. He could hear it clearly now. Officer voices, firm, impatient, soaked in authority. A trembling older voice, scared, defensive, the sound of something falling. Groceries? A bag? He wasn't sure yet. Mike quickened his stride. When he rounded the bend and saw them, he stopped cold. The scene under the willow, two uniformed officers stood towering over an elderly woman. She couldn't have been younger than 70. Her white hair was messy, falling over her shoulders. Her hands shook violently. A shopping bag lay overturned beside her, oranges rolling across the pavement. A loaf of bread flattened under a boot print. She wasn't dangerous. She wasn't attacking. She wasn't resisting. She was terrified and tired and confused. She sat on the edge of a bench, leaning back slightly as if trying to make herself smaller. The officers weren't beating her, but their actions were rough, careless, judgmental, alive with assumptions, not facts. One officer waved his hands angrily. The other tugged her wrist a little too hard while trying to question her. Her voice cracked. I was only sitting. My legs hurt. I didn't steal anything." The officer snapped back. "We got a call." "Stop lying." The old woman flinched. Mike clenched his jaw. The crowd gathers, people gathered, but from a distance, like they were observing a storm they didn't want to stand in. Some were recording, some whispering, some shaking their heads, but nobody stepped forward. Nobody asked questions. Nobody spoke for her. Fear controls crowds more than danger does. Mike Tyson exhaled deeply. Something inside him. Not rage, not aggression, not ego, but justice, memory, humanity, awakened with full force. The walk of a protector, he walked toward the officers. Slow, measured, powerful. The kind of walk that isn't threatening, but still makes everyone move out of the way without being asked. People noticed. "Is that... No way, bro, that's Mike Tyson? What's he doing here? Is he gonna help her?" The officers still didn't look up. The old woman's lips trembled, whispering, "Please, please help me." Mike's hands curled into fists for a second, then slowly relaxed. He knew he couldn't do what the younger version of him might have done. He wasn't here to fight. He was here to protect. His voice breaks the air. "Hey." Just one word. But it hit the air like thunder. Both officers turned. Their eyes narrowed with irritation. "Sir," one barked, "this is a law enforcement matter. Step back." Mike didn't step back. He stepped forward. and the temperature of the entire park dropped. The officer repeated louder, "Back away. Now." Mike pointed at the old woman, his voice calm, but deeper than the lake behind him. "What are you doing to her?" The officer scoffed. "She matches the description of a theft suspect." Mike raised an eyebrow. "Description? Or assumptions?" Silence. The old woman sobbed softly. "I didn't steal anything. I was just resting. My knees hurt." Her voice cracked, and it broke something inside Mike. He remembered how it felt to be powerless, how it felt when no one listened, how it felt when people judged your entire existence in one quick glance. He looked the officer dead in the eyes. "You're scaring her. She's involved in what?" Mike cut him off calmly. "Sitting on a bench?" The officer's jaw tightened. "Sir, leave. You're interfering." Mike stepped even closer. So close the officer could see the storm behind his calm gaze. "I'm interfering with what?" he asked calmly. The crowd leaned in. No one spoke. No one even breathed loudly. Mike's stare was solid. Not threatening. Not loud, just unshakable. "You haven't given her a chance to speak," he said. "You haven't asked what happened." "You're not even listening," the second officer snapped. "This is none of your—" Mike raised one finger, not at them. Between them a line, a boundary, a warning. "Respect the elderly," he said slowly, "and respect the truth." A murmur spread through the crowd. "He's right. She's just scared. Why aren't they asking first?" Phones kept recording. The officers finally realized the risk. The cameras, the crowd, the presence of a public figure. One officer whispered to the other, "We need to handle this carefully." "That's Mike Tyson." The other officer's face drained of color, and for the first time, they hesitated. Mike turns to the woman. He crouched beside her, slowly lowering himself at her eye level. He didn't touch her. He just sat near her, close enough for comfort. "Far enough for safety, ma'am," he said softly. "Are you okay? Tell me what happened." She wiped a tear with trembling fingers. I just sat down. My legs were hurting. I didn't know the bench belonged to that store." "I didn't know." Mike felt his heart twist. She was harmless, just tired, just human. Mike stood back up, faced the officers again. "You hurt her." The officers looked uneasy. "Now, we received a call that someone was loitering near the storefront," one said weakly. Mike nodded. "Call doesn't prove guilt. She fit the—" "Stop," Mike said. "You're treating her like a threat." "Sir, we're doing our job." "No," Mike replied firmly. "You're doing it wrong." This time, even some officers from the back, who had arrived quietly, shifted uncomfortably. Mike's voice grew deeper. "I've seen real criminals. I've seen real danger. And I've seen my own mistakes. And I can tell you," he pointed gently at the old woman, "she's none of those things." The crowd mumbled, "He's right. Poor lady. They're handling this so badly." Pressure grew. Cameras zoomed in. The officers felt it. A moment that changed everything. The old woman sobbed again. Mike turned to her gently. "Ma'am, I'm right here. You're safe." Those words, spoken by a man once seen as the most dangerous in the world, felt like a shield around her. The officer realized the situation had changed. He glanced at the crowd. He glanced at the cameras finally. He unclipped the tension from his posture and spoke softly. "Ma'am, can we hear your side properly?" Mike took one step to the side, not leaving her but giving space. "Now you're listening," he said quietly, and the entire park shifted. Something powerful happened. Not a punch, not a fight, not aggression, but justice took its first breath, and it started because a legend refused to walk away. The air in Greenwood Park felt different now, tighter, heavier. As if the trees themselves held their breath, Mike Tyson stood, beside the elderly woman, a quiet wall of protection, while the two officers hesitated under the weight of dozens of recording phones and a growing crowd hungry for answers. The officers exchanged a glance. The younger one, Officer Carter, cleared his throat. We received a complaint," he mumbled. A store owner nearby said an elderly woman was sitting too close to the storefront. Acting suspicious, Mike raised an eyebrow. Suspicious? How? His voice wasn't loud, but it had a way of shaking loose the truth. Officer Carter swallowed. "She was seen looking around a lot. Checking the street, moving slowly." Mike nearly laughed, but didn't. "She's old," he said calmly. She's allowed to move slowly, the crowd murmured in agreement. She doesn't look dangerous. She's probably just tired. My grandmother walks the same way. The older officer, Blake, stiffened. We still have to investigate. The caller thought she may be casing the store. Mike nodded slowly, then pointed to the spilled groceries on the ground. Does a criminal buy bread and oranges? Does someone planning a robbery walk with a cane and a discount store bag? Does a threat look terrified just sitting on a bench? The officers had no answer. Because Mike's voice wasn't confrontational. It was truth-wearing calmness. The woman finally speaks. Mike knelt beside the woman again, very gently, lowering himself so he was level with her eyes. Ma'am, can you tell us your name? He asked softly. She hesitated, then whispered, Eleanor. Eleanor Brooks. Her voice cracked like thin glass. Mike gave a reassuring nod. Mrs. Brooks, what happened today? You can tell me. She clutched her purse tightly, not out of fear of losing it, but fear of losing her voice. I was walking home, she said, breath trembling. I get tired easily, so I sat on that bench. Just for a moment, her hands shook harder, and the store owner yelled from inside. Told me I was blocking customers. I tried to explain, but he said I was lying. Then he called the police. Officer Blake shifted uncomfortably. Mike looked up at him. You didn't ask her this? He said quietly. Blake looked away. No, we were told it was urgent. Mike stood up slowly, calm yet powerful, and faced the officers fully. A call doesn't replace judgment, he said. It doesn't tell the whole story. It tells one side. Carter's face grew red with embarrassment. Blake looked like he wanted to sink into the earth. The crowd murmured louder now. She's innocent. Why didn't they listen first? This is so wrong. For the moment the crowd turns, a teenage boy stepped forward timidly. Excuse me. Officers? He said nervously. I recorded everything from the start. The officers stiffened. The boy continued. She didn't do anything. She was just sitting, holding her leg like it hurt. A young mom added, I saw her too. She was struggling to walk. That's why she stopped. An older man chimed in. She's been coming to this park for years. Never caused any trouble, one by one. Voices rose. Voices that were silent earlier. Voices that were afraid when the police first arrived. Voices that found courage behind Mike Tyson's presence. And suddenly, the officers were no longer facing just one man. They were facing the entire park. But Mike didn't let this become a mob. He lifted his hand gently. Everyone. Calm down, he said. His voice worked like a wave pushing back chaos. We're here to help her, not escalate. The crowd quieted. Even the officers took a breath of relief. Mike's heart remembers something painful. Mike sat on the bench next to Mrs. Brooks. He lowered his voice, speaking so only she could hear. You're safe now, he said softly. She nodded, tears gathering at the corners of her eyes, and in that moment, Mike felt something shift deep inside him. A memory, a forgotten ache from a time long before fame. Back when he was a poor kid, judged by how he looked, not who he was. He remembered being stopped for looking suspicious. He remembered adults calling him trouble. He remembered being misunderstood simply for trying to survive. Mrs. Brooks wasn't just an old woman. She was a symbol of everything he wished someone had done for him when he was small. Stand up, speak up, stop the unfairness. Mike blinked slowly, grounding himself in the present. Her safety was all that mattered now. Mike demands proper investigation. Mike rose again, turning to face the officers. Before you do anything else, he said calmly, you owe her something. Blake frowned. What? Mike's tone sharpened, but stayed controlled. A proper conversation. Respectful questions. And an apology for scaring her before listening. The officers looked stunned. Carter whispered, We didn't mean to scare her. But you did, Mike said. He wasn't angry. He wasn't loud. He wasn't aggressive. He was truth with discipline. And the officers felt it. Mrs. Brooks looked up, wiping her tears. It's all right, she whispered. I know people get busy. Maybe they were just trying to help. Her kindness softened the entire crowd. Even Mike closed his eyes for a second. People like her, people who forgive before they demand justice. They were the reason the world had hope. The store owner arrives, and the story twists just then. A man marched toward them, red-faced, angry, pointing aggressively. "That's her," he shouted. "That's the woman who was snooping around my store." "The store owner, Mr. Randall." Mike turned slowly. The park went silent again. Randall jabbed a finger at Mrs. Brooks. "She's been walking around my shop every day, looking inside, acting sketchy." Mrs. Brooks gasped. I walk past your store to go home. It's just the path I take." Randall interrupted angrily. "She said that yesterday, too." Mike stepped forward, placing himself between Randall and the trembling woman. "No yelling," Mike said firmly. "She deserves respect," Randall scoffed. "And who are you to tell me—" Then he froze, his eyes widened. He recognized the man standing in front of him. You're—" His voice cracked. "You're Mike Tyson." The crowd erupted in whispers. Randall swallowed hard, suddenly less confident. Mike didn't use anger. He used truth. "How many times have you wrongly accused her?" he asked quietly. Randall stuttered. I was just being careful. Our shop gets robbed a lot." "You thought wrong," Mike said. Blake, the officer, stepped forward. "Sir?" The crowd saw she didn't do anything. She was just resting. Randall looked around nervously at the faces judging him. For the first time, he looked less like an angry store owner, and more like a guilty man caught in a lie he told himself out of fear. He finally whispered, "I might have overreacted." Mike folded his arms. "Might?" Randall exhaled shakily. "I was wrong." Mrs. Brooks began to cry softly, not from pain, but from emotional release for the first time. Someone stood for her, and not just anyone, a legend. Mike extends his hand, a symbolic gesture. Mike turned to the officers. "No more fear," he said. Then to the store owner, "No more assumptions." Finally to Mrs. Brooks, "No more walking home alone without support." He extended his hand to her, a gesture gentle enough to melt stone. "Mrs. Brooks," he said, "let's tell your story properly. Let's clear everything today, and make sure it never happens again." She looked at his hand, then at his face, and then slowly wound with trembling fingers. She took it. The entire park seemed to breathe at once. The tension broke. The fear lifted. The truth finally stood upright, and a new chapter of justice began. Greenwood Park had never been this silent. Children had stopped playing. Joggers slowed to a halt. Couples who were just passing through now stood rooted in place, trying to understand how a tired old woman suddenly became the center of the entire park's attention. And Mike Tyson, calm, watchful, protective, stood at the heart of it all. Officer Blake cleared his throat. "Mrs. Brooks, if you don't mind, could you tell us where you were coming from today?" The elderly woman wiped her cheeks gently, still trembling from the shock. "I was coming from the community kitchen," she whispered. The crowd murmured. Mike frowned. "You mean a soup kitchen?" She nodded slowly. "I volunteer there. Every morning." Even Randall, the store owner who accused her, blinked in surprise. "You volunteer?" he muttered. Mrs. Brooks nodded again. "Yes, I prepare food for people who have no home. I may not have much, but I like helping." Her voice cracked with humility, the kind that makes you realize how wrong the world can be to people who deserve kindness the most. Mike's eyes softened. There was strength in her, an invisible strength only life's hardest chapters can build. The officers start to realize their mistake. Officer Carter stepped forward, his tone much gentler now. "Mrs. Brooks, earlier, when we approached you, you seemed very nervous. Why were you so frightened?" The old woman lowered her head. I'm always frightened." The crowd fell silent. Mike slowly knelt beside her again, keeping his voice soft. "Why, ma'am?" She took a shaky breath. "Because ever since my husband died, I've been living alone. People don't listen to me anymore. Sometimes they yell. Sometimes they think I'm in the way." Her voice broke. "I walk slowly, so I sit often. But every time I sit, someone asks why. They think I'm causing trouble. When I'm just tired." Mike clenched his jaw to hold back emotion, but his eyes flickered. He wasn't angry at her. He was angry for her. Blake rubbed the back of his neck, guilt written across his face. "We didn't know," he said quietly. Mike looked up at him sharply. "You didn't ask." The simple truth hit them harder than a punch. The store owner attempts to justify himself. Randall stepped forward, rubbing his palms together nervously. I didn't mean to scare her," he stammered. "It's just, lately we had some break-ins. I saw her walking past many times, gone looking inside. I thought—" Mike cut him off gently, but firmly. "You thought wrong." Randall swallowed. "I see that now." Mike took a step closer to him. "People walk slowly. People look around. Not everyone is a threat. Sometimes they're just tired, or lonely, or lost." Randall looked at the ground, shame washing over him. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I judged her too quickly." The old woman looked up, her frail eyes filled with tears, but also grace. "It's all right," she said softly. "I forgive you." Mike inhaled deeply. She was the kind of person who forgave even before she healed, the kind of person the world didn't deserve but desperately needed. But there was more. A deeper twist, officer. Blake opened his notepad. "Mrs. Brooks, do you have identification with you? Just so we can file the report correctly." She hesitated. Mike noticed instantly. Her hands went stiff. Her breathing quickened. Her eyes darted anxiously toward her purse. "Mrs. Brooks?" Mike asked gently. "Is everything okay?" After a long pause, she whispered, "I lost my ID." The officers blinked. The crowd murmured again. "How?" Carter asked carefully. Her voice grew small, almost childlike. "My home was broken into 2 months ago. They took everything. I've been trying to get new document but it's difficult without transportation." The park exhaled in collective heartbreak. Mike's face changed, not with anger, but with a pain that felt personal. He stood up slowly. "Where do you live?" he asked softly. She pointed toward the neighborhood across the street, a few blocks away. "Building 46, apartment 3B. I used to live at a better place. But after my husband died, everything got harder. I sold our old home to pay medical bills." Her voice trembled as she continued. "I walk everywhere now. I can't afford the bus. That's why I pass his store so often." She pointed gently toward Randall. "It's the only path home that doesn't hurt my knees too much." Randall covered his mouth, now fully understanding the gravity of what he had misinterpreted. "I had no idea," he whispered. "You didn't ask," Mike repeated softly. Blake's pen lowered. Carter lowered his head. A heavy silence swallowed the entire park. Mike's tone changes. The rising protector Mike took a long breath. His voice deepened, calm but carrying a seriousness that demanded attention. "Mrs. Brooks has done nothing wrong," he said. "She's tired. She's walking home. She sat down to rest." Blake nodded. "Yes. She's innocent." Carter nodded too. "We apologize for handling things poorly," Mike continued, his voice strengthening. "And she doesn't deserve to live like this, without ID, without support, without safety." Mrs. Brooks blinked tearfully. "I'm okay," she tried to say. "No," Mike said gently but firmly. "You're surviving. That's different." She looked at him with wet eyes, as if no one had spoken to her with such compassion in years. The crowd's reaction shifts, from shock to support. A young woman stepped forward holding flowers. "Ma'am, here," she said softly. "These are for you." Mrs. Brooks gasped in surprise. Another man offered to help her gather the groceries that had rolled onto the grass. A college student said, "Do you need help carrying things home?" For the first time since the incident started, Mrs. Brooks smiled, a small, fragile smile, one that looked like a flower blooming in winter. The officer's offer, Assistance Officer Carter, cleared his throat. "Mrs. Brooks, we want to make this right. We can drive you home today." She shook her head quickly, scared. "No, I don't want to trouble anyone." Mike stepped closer, reassuring her. "It's not trouble," he said softly. "It's respect." Blake nodded firmly. "We'll make sure you get home safely." "And," Carter added, "we can help you file paperwork for a new ID. And connect you with senior services." Mrs. Brooks covered her face with her frail hands, overwhelmed by kindness she hadn't expected from anyone today. I don't know what to say." Mike smiled. "You don't have to say anything. Let us help." But before she could stand, she collapsed suddenly, her body weakened, her knees buckled, her cane slipped from her hand. "Mrs. Brooks." Mike caught her instantly, strong arms supporting her fragile frame. The crowd gasped. The officers rushed forward. "Call an ambulance," someone shouted. "No, wait," Mike said, checking her pulse gently. "She's conscious. She's just weak." Mrs. Brooks whispered, "I haven't eaten since morning. I didn't have enough groceries left." Randall, the store owner, froze. Then his voice cracked. "Oh my God, this is my fault." Mike shook his head. "This is life being cruel, not you." Randall closed his eyes tightly. "No, part of it was me. I'll fix this. I'll fix everything." Mike takes charge. Again, he lifted her carefully onto the bench. "Get her water," Mike said. A teenager rushed to buy a bottle from a nearby vending machine. "Get her food," Mike added. Someone else ran toward a food truck and returned with 2 sandwiches. Mrs. Brooks tried to refuse. No, I can't accept all this." Mike held her hand gently. "You're not accepting charity," he said. "You're accepting care. There's a difference." She cried softly. But this time, it wasn't from fear. It was from the shock of being treated like a human being again. The park had slowly begun to settle. Children played again. The wind passed gently through the trees. The crowd that once trembled with tension now watched quietly, united in compassion. Mrs. Brooks sat on the bench holding a bottle of water in shaking hands. Mike Tyson stood beside her, still on alert, still protective, still watching everyone with the eyes of a guardian. But his attention wasn't on the officers, or the store owner, or the onlookers. His attention was on the photograph sticking out of her purse, a small, old black and white picture. Edges frayed, colors faded, the kind of photo you guard not because it's expensive, but because it carries your entire world inside it. Mike gently reached toward it. "Mrs. Brooks," he said softly. "May I see this?" She blinked, confused. "This?" She touched the photo with trembling fingers. "Oh, that's just my husband. My late husband." Mike swallowed. He already knew that, because he recognized the man in the picture. Even in faded ink, even in the wrinkles of age on the photo, even through decades, Mike knew that face. He lifted the photograph carefully. A tall man stood proudly in a military uniform, broad shoulders, strong jawline, confident yet kind eyes. A medal gleamed on his chest. One Mike had only seen in museums. Mike whispered, "No way." Mrs. Brooks leaned closer. "That's Samuel Brooks," she said quietly. "My Sam. My hero." Mike felt his throat tighten. He looked at her, really looked at her, and suddenly everything made sense. Her calmness, her dignity, her quiet strength, her ability to forgive instantly, her courage beneath fear. She wasn't just any elderly woman. She was the wife of a soldier whose name echoed in American history. Mike reveals the truth to everyone. Mike slowly stood up, holding the photograph like a fragile piece of history. He turned to the crowd. "Do you all know who this is?" His voice echoed. The crowd shook their heads. Mike lifted the picture higher. "This," he said, "is Sergeant Samuel Brooks." Gasps rippled across the audience. Officer Blake frowned. Officer Carter's eyes widened. "Sergeant Brooks?" Blake repeated, stunned. Mike nodded. "The man who single-handedly rescued 4 trapped soldiers during the Willow Creek wildfire operation." Silence swept the entire park. Mike continued. "Everyone thought he'd die trying. But he didn't. He carried those men through smoke and flames. half conscious, burned, bleeding, but refusing to quit. Blake whispered, "My father
Used to tell that story?
Mike nodded. He was a hero, a real one. Not a magazine hero, not a TV hero, a quiet one, the kind the world forgets too quickly. Mrs. Brooks's eyes filled as tears slipped down her cheeks. You remember him?" she asked softly. Mike kneeled down in front of her again, like a student before a teacher. "I met him once," Mike said with a trembling voice. "I was young, lost, angry, full of darkness." He swallowed hard, and he told me something I never forgot. The park leaned in closer, even the wind stilled. Mike whispered, "You're not defined by your past. You're defined by what you choose to stand up for." Mrs. Brooks covered her mouth in disbelief. "Sam told you that?" Mike nodded. "Yes, and today, I stood up because he once stood up for me." The officers felt their stomachs twist. Randall, the store owner, felt moisture gather in his eyes. The entire park lowered their heads out of respect, out of shame, out of realization. The officer's apology changes everything. Officer Blake stepped forward first. His voice shook. "Ma'am, I'm so sorry," he said. "I had no idea who you were. What you've done for this community. What your husband sacrificed for this country." Mrs. Brooks shook her head gently. "You shouldn't treat someone better just because of who they were married to," she said softly. "You should treat them better simply because they're human." Her words hit harder than any punch. Blake swallowed, tears forming. "You're right," he whispered. Officer Carter stepped forward too. "I judged you before I asked you anything. That wasn't fair. That wasn't policing. That wasn't human." Mrs. Brooks's weak smile made him tear up. Randall's fate turns around. The store owner stepped closer, trembling. "Mrs. Brooks, I was wrong about you." "No," she corrected gently. "You were wrong about how you see people." Randall's voice cracked. "I want to help fix that." Mike raised an eyebrow. "How?" Randall turned toward the crowd, toward the officers, toward the cameras recording everything. "I'm shutting my shop for the rest of the day," he announced. "And reopening tomorrow, with free groceries for all seniors in the neighborhood." The crowd gasped. Mike crossed his arms. "And that's not enough," he said softly. Randall nodded quickly. "No, it's not. So I'm also donating a month's worth of food to the community kitchen where she volunteers." The old woman's eyes flooded again. "Thank you," she whispered, voice shaking. Randall cried silently, "No, thank you, for reminding me what kindness looks like." Mrs. Brooks reveals her final burden as the weight of the moment settled. Mrs. Brooks looked down at her hands. "I'm embarrassed," she said suddenly. Mike frowned. "Embarrassed? Why?" She took a trembling breath. "Because for months, I've been struggling, and I never asked anyone for help." Mike placed a gentle hand over hers. "You've spent your whole life helping others," he said softly. "It's our turn to help you now." Mrs. Brooks's lips quivered. "My home, the one I moved into after Sam passed, it's falling apart. The pipes leak. The heater doesn't work. I've been using candles at night. I didn't want to tell anyone." The entire park froze. Even the officers closed their eyes as guilt pierced them again. Mike took both of her hands, his giant hands enveloping her frail ones. "Mrs. Brooks," he said firmly. "You're not going back alone," she blinked. "What do you mean?" Mike stood tall, shoulders squared. "I mean, I'm going with you. We're all going with you." The officers nodded immediately. Randall nodded too. Even some of the crowd stepped forward. Mrs. Brooks's breath hitched. For the first time in years, she did not feel alone, not even a little. For the first time since the incident began, Mrs. Brooks stood slowly from the bench, supported by Mike Tyson on one side and Officer Blake on the other. The entire park watched in respectful silence. She looked small, fragile, a little unsteady, but she wasn't trembling anymore, because she wasn't alone. Not today. Not anymore. The walk home that changed everything. A small procession formed as they left the park, Mike Tyson walking beside her, Officer Carter carrying her grocery bag, Officer Blake guiding the way, Randall, the store owner, holding extra oranges and bread, half the park walking behind in solidarity. People recorded, but with admiration, not gossip. Mothers held their children closer, whispering, "This is how you treat people." Teenagers watched in awe. Joggers removed their headphones. Old men nodded in respect. It looked less like a walk home, and more like a royal escort for a forgotten queen. Every step was a statement. She is valued, she is seen, she is safe. As they approached her building, a worn, aging apartment complex, Mrs. Brooks lowered her head, embarrassed. I'm sorry, she whispered. I know it doesn't look like much. Mike shook his head gently. No home is small when love lived inside it. She smiled weakly. It used to look nicer when Sam was alive. Inside the apartment, the truth revealed. When they stepped inside her unit, the entire group stopped, and their hearts broke. The heater was dead, the paint peeling, a leak in the kitchen bucket, broken shelves, a cracked window patched with tape, a single dim light bulb hanging weakly, a worn mattress on the floor. Mrs. Brooks saw their faces and immediately tried to hide her own shame. Please, don't judge me. I've been trying to keep up with the bills. And Mike placed his hand gently over hers. No judgment, he said softly. Only help. Only love. Officer Carter whispered. I can't believe she lives like this. Blake shook his head. This is unacceptable. Randall wiped the corner of his eyes. I ignored her. And she was walking home to this. Mrs. Brooks quickly shook her head. It's all right. I've learned to live with little. Sam used to say. She stopped suddenly, voice cracking. Sam used to say, life isn't about what you have. It's about what you give. Mike closed his eyes for a moment. He remembered those exact words from the hero soldier who once inspired him. And now, the widow of that hero was suffering silently in a forgotten apartment. Not anymore. The decision that shocked everyone. Mike stood tall, very tall. His voice echoed through the tiny apartment. Mrs. Brooks, get your things, she blinked. Oh, why? Mike smiled gently. Because you're not sleeping here tonight. Her eyes flooded instantly. I can't afford anything else. Mike shook his head again. You're not paying. It's on me. Randall stepped forward quickly. And on me. Blake nodded. On us too, Carter joined in. We'll do whatever it takes. Mrs. Brooks covered her face with her hands, overwhelmed. This is too much. No, Mike said softly. This is the bare minimum you deserve. The community joins the cause word spread quickly. Within minutes, neighbors came by with blankets. A carpenter arrived with tools. Someone brought cleaning supplies. Another offered paint. A local cafe brought warm food. A group of volunteers offered to stay and clean. The entire building became alive with kindness. People who barely spoke to each other before worked side by side like family. Mike sits with her. A heartfelt conversation. While everyone worked, Mike sat beside Mrs. Brooks on her old sofa. She watched the activity with disbelief. I don't understand, she whispered. What did I do to deserve this? Mike smiled gently. You lived. You helped. You loved. That's enough. She looked at him, tears slipping down. Why did you step in today? You could have walked away. Mike took a slow breath. Because I've been where you are, he said quietly. Misunderstood, alone, unheard. He looked at the photograph of her husband on the table. And because Sam once told me, when you see someone drowning in silence, be the one who pulls them up. Mrs. Brooks cried harder, clutching the picture. Sam always believed in helping strangers, she whispered. And today, Mike said softly, a stranger helped you, because Sam once helped him. She touched his hand gently. Thank you, Mike. He nodded once, a small, humble gesture. A new beginning. By evening, her apartment was transformed. New curtains, fresh paint, clean floors, fixed leaks, a real bed delivered by volunteers, a working heater repaired by a neighbor, food stocked in her kitchen, a framed picture of Sam placed lovingly on a shelf. Mrs. Brooks walked through the upgraded home in silent awe. It looks beautiful, she whispered. It looks like you're home again, Mike corrected softly. The final tear-jerking moment before leaving, Mike turned to her. Mrs. Brooks, he said gently, I want you to promise me something. She nodded slowly. What is it? Never be afraid to ask for help, he said. You're not alone in this world. Not anymore. Her eyes filled again. I promise. The officers hugged her before leaving. Randall apologized once more, vowing to check on her weekly. Several neighbors exchanged numbers with her. And as the crowd slowly left the apartment, Mrs. Brooks stood at her door, overwhelmed, whispering, "Sam." They remembered us today. A warm breeze blew through the hallway, almost like a silent answer. She looked at Mike one last time. "You saved me today." Mike shook his head gently. "No, you saved me years ago. I just returned the favor." They shared a soft, emotional smile, and then he walked away. Quietly, humbly, like heroes do when the job is done.